Hello, my name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 261 of Gaming with Grief, and I'm calling this episode What's Up, Nintendo? Just like last time we did Microsoft and Sony, now we're doing Nintendo. We talked about maybe doing some other ones, but right now we're focusing on Nintendo. Avin, when I sent you articles, I tried to send you stuff. The Nintendo, their official numbers, I know they're a little old, but I mean,
Right.
obviously they wouldn't lie because you're going to praise, you're going to give yourself flowers when it's this good. And I think as we talked about with the other developers, as I said privately and publicly, when Sony and Microsoft decided to focus on 4K, fidelity, Nintendo was like, we don't care. And they went right, they took a right turn. And as you could see from their sales figures, it paid off. As Sony is perpetually, like we just talked about with Sony, they're having to tell their shareholders, hey, we're not going to be able to sell as much. We're going to go from 25 to 21. Nintendo's like popping champagne in the corner, spraying all their developers with the champagne and just, I think, killing, everybody else. And the fact that the unit sales for some of their games are,
Massive.
just massive. Like when we talked again privately about some companies would be totally ecstatic with selling 2 or 3 million copies of a flagship title, and Nintendo's like, we sold 20. So
Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has shipped 60.5 million.
yes, I mean that's
Animal Crossing New Horizon 44.8.
that came out right when COVID hit. So everybody calls it like the COVID game because you're sitting at home and you're like, what? Oh, I can go outside in Animal Crossing and build my village, and and your friends through internet, which I heard wasn't great, but they could come to your island and look around and leave you gifts and stuff like. So you're like, hey, I can see my friends, kind of, What hit you while we were, when I sent these to you? What kind of stood out for you? These.
I mean, we've talked about it, right? And just like you just said, right? Nintendo focused on the gamer's experience and wasn't after the big flashy, the most powerful processor, 4K resolution. Like, they looked at, like, how do we make the game more interactive? How do we make the game more portable? And so, right, PlayStation, Xbox came out with really big, flashy, powerful consoles. And
Yeah.
Nintendo came out with the Switch.
The Switch
Ooh,
with like
Joy-Cons.
with like old Nvidia like phone and Integra chips, like they're like like we can get them affordably, and we want to keep the unit sale down, so we're going to use 4 of them.
Right. But we're going to be focused on, and you and I talked about this in the Xbox episode a little bit too, right? We're going to focus on fun. And it's paid off, right? Like, okay, so those are the game unit sales, which is huge. Their Nintendo Switch sales is 139.36 million units.
Yeah, this was a
from
while
this page
ago,
you sent
but
me. And
yeah.
this is on the Nintendo page.
Yeah.
So fiscal data, right? Like, that's a massive amount of units that they're selling. The things to keep in mind, right? The Switch is less expensive compared to the other consoles.
It's $299.
It's still less expensive.
Yeah, it's $299. I think the Switch Lite is cheaper, and I know they have an OLED. So when you pop it, they have an OLED for like $350. And
it's a little bit less expensive, so it's more accessible. It's convertible, so you can connect it to your TV and play, or you can take it with you as you're moving around and play.
Yeah.
So it gives you kind of a mixed experience on that.
Right.
Relatively simple and easy interface, right? Like, Nintendo really knocked it out of the park with this one, and they really hit that fun factor. And then I think Nintendo has another advantage in the fact that Nintendo does one thing. Microsoft does a bunch of things. Sony does a bunch of things. And while the Xbox division is a single division within Microsoft, gaming, the PlayStation, is a single division within Sony, Microsoft as a company isn't focused exclusively on gaming. Sony as a company isn't exclusively focused on gaming. Nintendo is. It's their blood. It's their bread and butter. It is what they do, and they do it well.
Yeah, they made playing the Hanafuda playing cards like 100 years ago. That their whole thing is a toy company. Like everybody points out, Microsoft and Sony are technology companies, right? With IT and all this. Nintendo has always been a toy manufacturer. So they're like,
Right.
how do we make this fun? And I remember years ago when you were over here watching me play the Wii with the crappy 480 graphics when everybody went to HD, and I was playing Mario Galaxy and I was just exploring. And I remember you looking at me going, this doesn't look good, but this looks really fun. And I was like, that's Nintendo, man. That's what they do. They're like, we don't care. And I remember when the Wii U came out, that was their first HG generation from the Wii to the Wii U. And they released several statements saying, hey, we realize that making things at this high fidelity takes time. So we're going to have to postpone this game or, this product because we want it to be up to our level of, we want it to be up to our level of quality. But we admit this is hard. And one thing I'll say about Nintendo, too, is like Miyamoto, who's been with the company since its founding, well, not founding, but like in the he came out with Mario and Donkey Kong. His whole thing about we really try to find the fun first and then design like the fun new gimmick or idea, and then we wrap the game around that. And many people have commented online through the years that if like Sony and Microsoft to be like, what do we do with Kratos? What do we do with Master Chief? How do we put him in a story to make this good or moving or whatever? What Nintendo does is, hey, we have these cool ideas. Let's put Mario in this. We have this really cool idea. Let's make this a Zelda game or whatever. They kind of find the fun thing first and then decide where the character is going to go or what character is going to get put into the thing. So that's usually what they do. So,
Which, right, when you focus on it that way, that works.
and you can see from
And you're seeing it in the sales. Yeah.
yeah, and you're just and the thing is too, I don't know if these are the total sales because Nintendo is one of the big three that doesn't really report digital sales unless, obviously they're sharing their flowers and saying we're really great to their shareholders. So I'd imagine some of these numbers are probably higher, but I don't know if that's true because it's their website. So I imagine that it is probably their data. And the last thing that I shared with you article wise was just the Super Nintendo world. So like we talked about with Sony and Microsoft investing in other sources of revenue, while they're looking at bringing things to PC, or like Microsoft investing in Game Pass or things like that. Nintendo's like, hey, why don't we make a theme park and you can have a piranha shaped cheeseburger or a mushroom steak,
Right.
and have fun, and it's like just a completely different philosophy than the other two. And that's, I think, what makes, I think if right now, if Nintendo was exactly like Sony or Microsoft, it would be so boring because they're all
Right.
they're all pretty much doing the same thing. They have the same amount of graphics. Yeah, they're both pushing 4K. Sony put 8K on the PlayStation 5 box. Get out of here with that. Hey, we need to worry about ray tracing and stuff in our games. Oh man, we couldn't hit 1080 in this Microsoft game. You watch Digital Foundry, which I don't know do you know about Digital Foundry, Evan? Have you ever looked at Digital Foundry?
I'm familiar with the name.
They're a YouTube channel that does like tech things and they run things at frame rates. And over the past few years, they've been doing a lot of gaming stuff. And they literally break down frame rates and like aliasing and, field of view and all that stuff. And they get really granular. And it's so fascinating because, as you're reviewing the game on Xbox or whatever, you're like, why is this running like crap? And then you do a side by side with like PlayStation. You're like, well, this seems to be better, but this is worse. Why is this a lock frame rate? And Digital Foundry goes into all that. So if there's a game that I'm really interested in, I don't do it with every game, but I'll look at Digital Foundry and be like, wow, they really went into it on this, on like why this is running this way and stuff like that. And, what they're doing. And, they literally take the machine. Yeah, they take machines apart and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, again, I'm just kind of blown away that Nintendo's like, we don't care. Like, you guys can chase.
I mean, you and I were talking about this before offline, right? We were talking about this episode and talking about Nintendo and looking through all the unit sales and like the history of the company for all their different consoles that they like their own numbers that they're reporting. And you can see like this sort of like steady decline for a while as the other consoles were winning more and more, right? And the Genesis came out, and then the PlayStation shows up, and the Nintendo sales are
Sega
slowly
does what
slipping.
Nintendo don't. That was Sega's whole thing. You know, they had
Yeah.
all that stuff.
And then it was like at the Wii U, they were down to like 13 million units sold. And you brought up at that point, like the gaming industry was like, they should just license, they should just get out.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember talking about that, right? And you brought up, and I wasn't aware of this, that at the time people were on the defensive for Nintendo. Were bringing up like Nintendo's got an obscene amount of cash on hand.
Yeah.
They don't need to wait for you guys. And then the Switch came out, and they blew it out of the freaking water.
Now, they're literally like, I've seen some figures of like what they have in the bank because they also invest in the stock market. I'm sure Sony and Microsoft do, but they trade in currencies. And I'm sure they are literally like Scrooge McDuck right now, just jumping in a big thing. And then it's like, well, what do we want to do? You know, because to be clear as well, when Tears of the Kingdom came out, it was, I believe, one of the first games that they released at $70. So all their games before that had been $60, and they released Tears of the Kingdom, and they said it was going to be a case by case basis, where they were going to decide which games were going to be 70 and 60. And it was like, of course, it's going to be Tears of the Kingdom. It's a follow up to one of the best selling Zelda games ever, Breath of the Wild, which you had the figures, which I had an old number. What is it? What Breath of the Wild was at 30, and Tears of the Kingdom was at 20 or something, I think.
Breath of the Wild's 31.6 currently,
Yeah.
and Tears of
As
the Kingdom's at 20.28.
Yeah. So,
And by the way, current, if I'm reading this correctly, the current cash position, which their end cash position, according to Yahoo Finance, is 1,194,000,000 plus.
pretty good. I mean,
That's their cash position. Their
and
operating cash flow is 322 mil.
well, and everybody talks about how
I
much
don't know what
money.
the others are.
Well, everybody talks about how much money Microsoft has, but again, they're a technology company with their, if you'll excuse the thing, their octopus-like tentacles everywhere, right? And Nintendo just has one arm that's reaching over the gaming space, saying, "This is what we're doing." Well, besides, they have movie things. The Mario Brothers movie did really well. I don't know if you saw that. They have theme parks, but I think those are just kind of like side things where they do care about them, and there is a level of quality there. But I don't think they ever take their eyes off the ball. Where they're like, we really got to focus on this. And again, it's paying off for them. So,
And I'm not seeing an actual specific margin number here, but it looks like in the last year, based off of the most recent quarterly results, they've had an earnings. So EBITDA, if you're not familiar with it, it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
it's called EBITDA.
So
That is
EBITDA.
sound EBITDA. It sounds like
It's a giant acronym.
I know, but it sounds like you're trying to think of a word. Like an like you're like EBITDA, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're like trying to think of like.
Yes, it does actually sound like that.
You're like like yeah.
So really, really common business performance metric is EBITDA. And they did, based off of the last quarterly results reported on Yahoo Finance, annualized, it's 685 plus, actually more than that, 685,694,000 in earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and appreciation. So that actually takes out operating expenses and everything else. So their margin, if I'm roughly doing it in my head, is really stinking good.
Better than Sony when you said it was what 6%.
By a massive amount. But I don't actually see it calculated, and
What's your napkin math is way better than my napkin math. What's your napkin math saying?
well, their total revenue was 1.7 billion,
It's pretty good.
and their earnings was 685 million. So they're probably
It's a $400 million difference.
no, it's
Oh, you said 1 point.
dollar difference, right? So they're probably around the 30% to 40% range.
That's really good. I wonder what Microsoft says. We've done Sony and Microsoft. So Sony said it was what 6% their margin.
Yeah, the problem with Microsoft is I'd have to really go digging here to find what Microsoft's Xbox division's operating margins are. But Nintendo has a bunch of other areas. One of the other areas when I was just looking this information up, like roughly, is
Well, they have
year over year. December of 2023 was the most recent quarterly financials reported. And if you look at that one, year over year, the revenue was down, but their net income was up by 18%. 2023 versus 2022. Their net earnings per share was up. Their net profit margin was up. Um, it looks like net profit margin's 22.85.
it's still pretty good.
Which
22.
was up 25% versus 2022 in the same time
So
frame.
they were at 12 then.
Yeah, operating income was 1.8 billion. Or no, 184 billion. Was that the other numbers I'm looking at bad? Uh, anyway, financially, Nintendo was performing far, far better than Sony or Microsoft.
And also there was a thing coming out. I mean, financials are good, right? But there was also a thing. I think it was like 2 years ago or a year ago. It wasn't that long ago where they had like on Metacritic they had like 5 of the top 10 or 7 of the top 10 highest reviewed or Metacritic games. So all their games were like in the upper Metacritics for the year, which is like crazy. So not only financially they're doing well, but like fans who do reviews on Metacritic, which isn't everybody, but it's a better swath of people than just you or I talking on a pod. Customers found, I don't want to say customers, players found their stuff fun and engaging and gave it good reviews. And
Right.
they released good
Right.
products. So it's like they're killing it financially and players are like, keep bringing it on.
People are actually enjoying their games and reporting that they're enjoying their games. And, right, like, how does the gaming world work? I really love this game. You guys should play it. I mean, the Zelda games, the last two Zelda games have been phenomenal hits.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you've just seen me play, I think both of them, maybe
Yeah.
watch me, but it's like, it's crazy. I should just log back into Tears of the Kingdom and you can send little 30-minute clips or 30-second clips. And since you can glue things together, I should just send you that chef and show you shenanigans that I've gotten into where like you make a hot air
You show
balloon.
me some.
Yeah, like there was one where I made a hot air balloon and I thought it was clever, but I put it on a wood plank, like a wood, like a 4 foot by 4 foot, like wood, whatever. And when I lit the hot air balloon, everything just slowly caught on fire and I fell down the side of a cliff. I was like, oh, maybe I should have done the stone one instead of the wood one. But whatever. I'm just
Sure.
gonna start over again. But it was funny because things started to catch on fire, and when they catch on fire in the game, they just disappear. So like sections of it started to disappear as it was falling down. I'm like, oh god, mayday, mayday! And what do? I got I was like trying to put stuff. You can like fuse rockets to your shield. I was like, I gotta go. I gotta Paris. It was stuff like that where you're like, this is. But it's all that kind of stuff where like I've said before, I've reviewed Nintendo games and stuff on Game with Grief, and what I always say, and I'm sure I stole this from someone I didn't come up with, but every time I play a Nintendo game, or at least 80% of the time, I am just either smiling or laughing my butt off when I'm playing, and I don't care about because even people complained about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, like, well, like the frame rate kind of goes a little wonky when you start gluing stuff together, but it's still playable, right? You don't ever go like, oh man, it crashed or whatever. It's like I heard one reviewer on a Nintendo podcast say that they had friends that obviously worked in development, and everybody when the game came out and was playing it was like, I'm holding in my hands this game and it is witchcraft. I do not understand on how this 8-year-old machine or 7-year-old machine that this is running and this thing isn't lit on fire and it hasn't shut off. Like everything's working as intended. Like they are truly like magicians at Nintendo where they're like, we made it work, everybody. And a lot of people point out with Nintendo, one thing I want to bring up too is art style. They lean a lot on their art departments to kind of like where Sony and Microsoft again are about fidelity. Man, look at how many hairs Kratos has in his beard, and I could see a little, I could see one eyelash kind of jut off in a different direction, and they had to animate that. Nintendo uses art to like hide a lot of the rough edges, and I think definitely with Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, you go to some place and go, this looks beautiful. Does it run at 60 frames? No. And I've seen mods where people do wizardry on YouTube and like, hey, here's it running in Unreal 5, and the whole game breaks because it's like it wasn't designed to do that. Like you just broke the game. But it does surprise me so much how Nintendo's able to do so much with so little. And I think that's because one of the things that got reported before the Switch came out was, they had the handheld division, like with the 3DS and the DSi, and obviously their console division. And there was a small news report where some people knew something big was going to happen, but it said, hey, we've folded these people together, so now they're working together. We no longer have two different departments. And that's how, when you're able to play Breath of the Wild and unplug it from the dock and you're playing the same game. Because when I owned old Nintendo systems, that was my complaint. I'm playing Zelda on the Wii U, and now I have to get the 3DS version of Zelda, which is a completely different game and a completely different story and new mechanics. It's like, well, now I just undock it and I'm playing. Everything carries over. Everything stays the same.
And that's another area Nintendo actually like utterly dominates, right? Like PlayStation tried to do the Vita, right?
Yeah, they came out with.
Nintendo completely owns the handheld portable space.
Well, they came out. Well, one thing, Sony did come out with a new one called the PlayStation Portable, but it only connects to Wi-Fi, and you have to use your Remote Play app. So unless you have really good Wi-Fi, it's kind of spotty. Now, people say the quality is like OLED and it's really good, but like you need to be near your system, which wasn't ideal. The only thing that's kind of eating Nintendo's lunch is the Steam Deck. There's this new Steam Deck out that is OLED, has an OLED screen, and has a little bit more memory, is a little bit better. But in my opinion, I understand if you travel a lot and stuff like that, you want to do that. I don't do that, so I can sit down and play Baldur's Gate 3 on my PC without, like, I could see if I was a journalist, like a gaming journalist, and I had to go to conventions and stuff, you throw that Steam Deck and whatever, they're also going to have a dock, or they have a dock already that you can use it as a mini PC, but for me, it's just not ideal. It's like I can walk away from my computer for a few days, unless I absolutely have to play something, So that's why I do try to get stuff on PlayStation or Switch. Like, by the way, I just want to shout out a quick game. It's on Switch. It's called Vampire Survivors. Avin, you should try it. I think you would like it. Basically, it is a survival game where it's an auto battler. So you basically start a stage. It's like 8-bit graphics. You start a stage and you are just automatically like throwing weapons or using a whip. It's based on Castlevania assets that came back on the 8-bit thing. It was like from an asset store, and the guy made this game. And enemies are coming into the screen, and you're trying to defeat them and then grab gems and level up. And every time you level up, you get a random level up. Like, do you want a whip that moves faster? Do you want a cross that'll come out of your character and fly over the screen and hit enemies? Do you want garlic that'll make a radius around you that'll keep enemies away from you? That'll hit them when they try to get to you. And every time you level up, you get another random thing. Do you want this bird that'll fly and dive bomb people? And you try to last as long as possible because there's a timer on top. And the higher the time gets, the more dangerous enemies come in. And you're just trying to last as long as possible. It's very addicting. The guy that developed the game used to develop for literally slot machines in Vegas. So you'll find a chest and it'll explode with light, and you're like, this is where the casino stuff comes in, because you get a thing, but you don't have to spend any money. The game's like $2 on Steam or $3 on Steam, so you should check it out. Like, yeah.
Wow.
And there's no in-game whatever. If you'll get different characters.
Just how long you can go.
Yeah, and then there's other characters you can unlock. So
what's it called?
It's called Vampire Survivors. And then
totally a tangent from our original conversation.
I just wanted to say I was playing it on Switch and I had it on Xbox because it's a part of Game Pass, and we had some construction going on, and obviously my internet sucked and I couldn't log onto the cloud, or because some stuff isn't available on the cloud on Microsoft. So I was like, well, it's $3. I'll get it on Switch, and you have to start all over. And I was like, here we go. And I started all over. There's different stages you unlock. To get certain in-game achievements, like, hey, you last 10 minutes, you've unlocked a new character, they have a new weapon, they have a new whatever. It's like, oh, I want to try this person, There's an old man called Poe who just radiates garlic, so people stay away from him, but his movement speed is lower and he has less health than everybody. But I had him powered up so much through random power-ups that he was just standing still with a cane, because he walks around with a cane, and things couldn't get near him because I had garlic on him. And it was pretty crazy. But again, that's on Steam, and like it's stuff like that where you're like, even if you don't want to buy a Steam Deck. You're playing these indie games that are $3 going, I don't, this is 16-bit graphics. It doesn't need to run smooth. Like, there's nothing here that's pushing the system, and I could play this for 100 hours.
It's just fun.
Yeah.
It's just fun.
It's stuff like that. And again, I think that's why Nintendo's just killing it. Where, again, I made the joke, but they were wahooing around everybody. When Sony and Microsoft are like, oh, we got to R&D. How are we going to do this? We got to go 8K. We got to push this. This game costs $300 million. The only thing that I haven't seen with Nintendo is, like we talked about with Sony and Microsoft, some of that stuff has been reported, their budgets. I haven't really heard Nintendo's budgets, but they have internal studios, that worked on Tears of the Kingdom, that worked on Mario Kart, that worked on all these. I'd like to hear their, what their budget is for those kind of games. Because I just like an example of like, hey, we spent $100 million on Tears of the Kingdom, but we worked on it for 6 years. Or whatever, because that was a long, like, that's the kind of stuff you want to be like, wow, they're really, 30 million copies. That's a hell, 20 million. That's a heck of a return on the investment they made of 150 million. That's the only kind of disconnect I see between Nintendo and Sony and stuff like that. But even with Sony, it had to happen through leaks, all that stuff had to be leaked out. Like, and then if we talked about Epic, I think it was Microsoft. There was some court case and like The Last of Us, some Sony stuff leaked because they were trying to use it as a comparison. And those people knew the numbers and they leaked the budgets of a few Sony games where they were still around $250 million. Where you're like, so they're spending in parity to Microsoft, Right. And like I said, Nintendo's the only one where I'm like, what are you guys spending? When you guys sit down and do, Tears of the Kingdom, you're following up, you already have the technology's there, but what are you going to add? Like, how much more R&D are you going to, stuff like that. That's
how much time do you spend? How much time is spent in art, right? Like, you add it up. Developers aren't cheap.
Yeah. I mean, when Breath of the Wild came out, they released a documentary, and they said when they were R&Ding the game, they took the old 8-bit assets from the original Legend of Zelda and put in these new systems to see if they could get them to work at that level. And then they got them to work at that level with like stuff catching on fire, or like you flying and gliding. Even though it was 8-bit, you could see your character was gliding. They wanted to make that stuff work there, and they go, "Hey, this is actually really fun, even 8-bit. What if we, obviously we want to bring this up. How do we keep adding systems? Yeah, without things just breaking and the game just ending and like hard crashing to the system every time." So, I mean, what do you think in conclusion? I mean, again, Nintendo is killing it, but
I think Nintendo's doing a really good job right now. I feel like there is some negative press, but I can't think of any at the moment. Like their games are fun. They're making money like crazy. It's interesting their stock price is so low. It's like $12 or $13
for a share. Unfortunately, I can't do that because I report on games and talk about games. It's kind of a conflict of interest when you have stock in a company and start talking about how you think they're messing up. I've heard many of reporters say I can't do that, and I've heard people on podcasts, they're like, why didn't you say anything? And the guy's like, well, I own stock in that company, so I can't, because sometimes shareholder meetings, you may be privy to stuff before other people. So you can't go popping off about the news. Can't go popping off about the news when you own, a couple thousand shares of, Sony.
I mean, one way or the other, it's interesting. It's so low. I mean, again, we already talked about, right? Nintendo isn't Sony or Microsoft and like has their hand in everything. So it kind of makes a difference, but Microsoft shares are over $400 a piece right now.
Yeah.
So like there's a little bit of difference between the two. All of that to say, right? Like I was kind of surprised at the sales numbers, right, from Nintendo's sales numbers, but it 100% makes sense. It's far more accessible. People are way more comfortable giving their kid a Switch than they are giving their kid a PS5.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and they're playing it with them. They're like, yeah, I'll play.
And giving little Johnny or Susie a Switch to play to keep them occupied on the road.
And
way easier.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, you're playing it with them. You're like, yeah, like because you remember Mario Kart back in the day. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna sit down and play Mario Kart instead of like, what's this God of War? I don't know who Kratos. It came out.
I'm not gonna have my 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old playing God of War.
or just the history of it. Of like, oh, I played it back in the day. It was on PlayStation, and they've revamped it. It looks really good. Oh yeah, his wife died, and he's sad. That's a rough sell to just be like, hey, do you just want to be Mario, but he's in a galaxy where gravity works, and he gets sucked in a gravity well or gets pinned to something, and yep, you still got to collect coins, and like that's the thing, and get the star at the end of the level. It's like I remember that, like of course, like I'll do that. So yeah. It's stuff like that.
So it's a little bit, this particular episode, a little bit more positive, a little less griefy. Microsoft's doing not as well in their public image, right? And they're trying. Sony, in our Sony episode, I mentioned it. I think Sony's probably the one doing the worst for public image at the moment. And Microsoft and Xbox have gone back and forth on that with Sony for the last, I don't know, several years. It seems like each console they go back and forth on how much they piss off their audience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say this, like, to conclude,
Nintendo just keeps being fun.
Yeah, and one thing I really liked, it was a Game Awards, man, years ago. But I loved it. There was a thing at the Game Awards before they started where all three heads of the studios did an intro together on the stage, like standing, next to each other.
Oh, cool.
Where it was Phil Spencer, I think Sean Layden of Phil Spencer of Xbox, Sean Layden of Sony, and Reggie Fils-Aimé of Nintendo, and they just talked about how games mattered, and they each had like a paragraph to read, and it was really nice. I was like, this is what it should be. These guys going, hey, Microsoft, I loved Halo, and I even like, to keep this positive, I do like on social media. It seems like when any company, like when Sony releases a game, Phil Spencer or somebody from the team at Xbox will be like, hey man, happy launch day. We're we got to work, but we're going to dive in when we get off or something, or Sony will be like, hey man, you got Halo Infinite out the door. Awesome. We're going to go be Master Chief for a bit. And Nintendo kind of does that every once in a while where they're like, hey, we can't wait or whatever to play this game. And it's kind of stuff like that where you're like, hey, they don't really, there is a console war, but like these guys know, they all play games. And I've heard developers say, listen, everybody talks about console wars, but like we just like playing games. So like, yeah, we're working on God of War, but like on our lunch break when Tears of the Kingdom comes out, right. Sure as hell we're in the lunchroom eating lunch, playing Tears of the Kingdom handheld in the corner, and then we got to go back and make God of War. Like we're not going, oh, Nintendo sucks, I don't like these graphics. They're like, man, this is really fun. Like, oh, right, I got to go make God of War. And so I think all that,
the same people making the games a lot of the time are also the ones playing the games. And
yeah.
So of course they want to go enjoy everything that's out there.
Yeah. I just wish there was more of that than and Nintendo, like I said, I'm so glad Nintendo's doing what they're doing, because I think we would be doing a real grief episode about this, Nintendo's making a 4K ray tracing box. I guess it doesn't, it's boring. So, well, thanks for
chasing stats.
Yeah, they're chasing trends. Well, thanks for doing this, Avin. Again, I think I want to do this on the Epic Game Store, because it is so strange to me that it is still, I haven't logged in a while. They do offer things, but they're one of the only PC platforms that I know of that does exclusivity. There's been several developers that'll be like, hey, they came to me and said, hey, we'll only release it through the Epic Game Store. We'll give you money to develop the game, but you can't release it to Steam. And so some developers take them up on that because they obviously need money to develop the game. And some developers are like, no, man, I've wishlisted stuff. I haven't released it yet, but I did have a wishlist page on Steam. There's a lot of demand there. I can't just release it on Epic. And, there's like the Mines of Moria, which is a Lord of the Rings game where you play a dwarf, mining Moria and like rebuilding the society down there. And that's only on the Epic Game Store. But what I think is great about that, if you watch any footage, everything's fully voiced. And when your dwarf starts mining or, using a pickaxe, they start singing Dwarven ballads, like humming away the day while they're working. I was like, this is kind of cool. But then I was like, is this on another console? It's like, it's only on the Epic Game Store. And I was like, come on, I don't want to download. Just like we talked about the Sony episode, I don't want to download another launcher. I don't want to make another account. And now all this stuff's stuck on that account. Like, I don't have any friends on the Epic Game Store. No one cares. like, what am I supposed to share this? So yeah. So we'll probably do that in a couple weeks about Epic. So
that sounds good.
Yeah, thanks for joining me again, Avin.
Good to be here.
Okay.